Hey guys, thanks for joining me again for some more Mindful Minutes with Dr. Rich Martin. I'm privileged and honored that you're watching, and I hope that these are valuable to you. Today, I want to talk about some failures you should avoid. Now, I've talked in the past about failures being learning opportunities, and that's absolutely true. And we shouldn't necessarily avoid failures because failures mean we're trying. We're trying things that are a little beyond maybe what we think we're capable of. And each time we fail, it's an opportunity to learn and grow and get better. So failures aren't always a bad thing. In fact, predominantly they are, but there are certain failures that are. So Doug Crandell wrote a book, Leadership Lessons from West Point, and he lists 3 types of what he calls leadership failures. I would argue that they're just failures that any of us will make throughout our lives. And the first one is the failure of what we do. Those are those failures that I talked about. Trying new things, stretching, reaching, challenging yourself, failing, learning, trying again, and then repeating that process until we finally succeed. But he talks about 2 others, and the first one is the failure of who we are. Now, these often come kind of wrapped in or hidden in the failures of what we do, but there's an underlying tone to the reason for the failure that really cuts to us in particular. It's not so much that we've tried something new and we're trying to grow and stretch and we've just failed. These are things that are failures of who we actually are. So did I take an easy way out, take a shortcut that resulted in the failure? I was lazy, that violated who I am, and that was the reason for the failure. Maybe I was arrogant. Maybe people were offering me help and advice and I refused to take it. Those are kind of the failures of who I am. And then the third one is really the most heartbreaking of all. It's the failures of who we want to be, because these really kind of speak to who we are at our very core. I've talked in the past about our values in the video, What Do You Stand For? And this is a violation of those core values that we hold dear. Now, Crandell talks about his failure as a platoon leader, as a new platoon leader, after graduating West Point, and how he was sitting at a diner having a warm meal while his men were out in the field training in the cold and the wet and the damp, and probably eating military rations, the MREs, which if you haven't had the pleasure of an MRE, you've got to have the experience. Pleasure certainly is not the correct adjective. A little sarcasm there. And as he's eating, as he takes the first bite out of that hamburger, he realizes that he's violating one of the core principles of being an infantry platoon leader, is that the men always come first. In fact, I've talked about Simon Sinek and his premise of knowing your why. Well, Simon Sinek published a book that I thought was very interesting called Leaders Eat Last, and that's a core military principle of the men always come first. So there were often times that leaders in the field, in the military, after all of the men go through the chow line, there's very little left. So you just kind of divvy that up, whatever was left amongst the leaders, because it was more important that the men got their meal first. And now with the integration of the thankful integration of the military, now it's no longer the men and women come first. Right? So his point was he violated that very core value that he held dear. And he walked out of that diner without finishing his meal. And he learned a great lesson about what his values were and who he wants to be. And he realized he never wants to be that person that puts himself above the people he's leading. So a very powerful lesson to me and anybody that's in a leadership position, but a very powerful lesson for all of us when we talk about really analyzing where the failures come from. Because the only way to truly learn from our failures is to deeply reflect and be honest with ourselves about what the causes of those failures are. Was it a failure because we were trying to do something that we weren't quite ready for and we were challenging ourselves a little too much? Fine, keep trying. But was it a failure of who we are? Or was it a failure of who we want to be? Hope these were helpful to you. Hope they were insightful. I hope they get you thinking so that you can continue to grow and continue to be working on being the person that you truly can be. So have a fantastic day, and I'll see you at the next Mindful Minutes with Dr. Rich Martin. Take care.